This is a continuation of our lesson on measurement. So just as a reminder, with the learning objectives, this is a little bit different than the video before. I'm showing you learning objectives 1 through 9, and the ones highlighted in bold are the ones that will be covered by this video lecture. So we're going to pick up with number 4, talking about different levels of measurement for variables. So we're going to be talking about 4 different levels of measurement: nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. Though for the most part, we're going to be combining interval and ratio. So I'll actually come back to these definitions, but I think it's easier to see an example. So nominal measurements are variables whose attributes are different, right? But you can't rank them, and you can't do other sort of mathematical operations to them. So one example of a nominal measure would be gender, right? In this case, they're just talking about gender as a binary, female and male. You can't put them in a rank order. An ordinal measure would be something that we can put into a rank order from low to high, perhaps, but we can't necessarily say, like, measure the distance between attributes or talk about them in terms of addition or multiplication. So oftentimes this could be something like on a Likert scale. So the example here is measuring religiosity. How important is religion to you? From not very important to most important thing in my life. So we can rank order these things as opposed to nominal, but we can't really think about them in terms of numbers. And again, interval ratio, we're going to kind of talk about together. Most measurements you'll encounter are ratio measures, so we'll talk about that first. And that's something like income, where we think of it in terms of numbers. There is a zero, and more than that, if I make $20,000 a year and you make $40,000 a year, we can say that you make twice as much as I do. If your household has 6 people in it and mine has 3 people in it, your household is twice as large. Interval measures are not as common. They're things like IQ, like SAT score. It is numbers. There isn't a zero. It's often things on some sort of a scale. So just to come back to these definitions, nominal is something with a non-ranked category, also things like yes, no. Ordinal is a ranked category, often using a Likert scale. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Interval, numbers but no true zero, often scale scores. And ratio, numbers with true zeros. Okay. So another way you might find it easier to think about it is going from nominal to ratio of increasing complexity. Nominal is categories, ordinal has that word order in it. Interval, the distance between them has meaning, but then the ratio is this absolute zero. Things like income, things like household size. Ratio is more common. All right, so if we think back to video 1, we were looking at extracurricular activities and how that's associated with academic achievement. There's lots of different ways we could measure extracurricular activities. And one way would be to think about different levels of measurement. So on the one hand, maybe we're interested in the type of activity, and that would count as a nominal variable. On the other hand, maybe we're interested in the frequency, right? Or the degree of liking certain types of activities. Or maybe we're interested in looking at the hours spent participating, which would be a ratio measure. Okay, so some examples of some common nominal measurements. Things like gender, race and ethnicity, religion, where you're from, what your major is, and so on. Ordinal, again, is ranked categories, so maybe level of satisfaction, health, social class. Age, if you're thinking about it in terms of these broad age categories. Age, thinking about it as in terms of years or months or weeks, would be ratio. Interval, again, not as common, so temperature actually is an interval ratio, a Q-score, SAT, or other types of standardized tests. Ratio is any sort of number that has that true zero. So that's actually a lot of things. So anytime you kind of think of a number, it tends to be a ratio measurement. So this concept of Likert scaling comes up a lot in behavioral and social sciences. So it's a question format that's frequently used, and respondents indicate their choice from sort of an ordered response category, often from strongly agree to neutral to strongly disagree, often on a 5-point scale, but could also be 4 or 7. All right, so here's your chance to practice. Take a look at these variables and what level of measurement are they? And maybe for some, you can make an argument for one or the other, but make that argument. What is the level of measurement for each of these variables? And again, it helps to think, this is the variable, it helps to think, what are the attributes? So go ahead and pause the video and practice levels of measurement with these. All right. So this is what I would argue for. Level of education is ordinal, and it's level of education thinking middle school, high school, some college, graduate degree, as opposed to years of education, which you could think of as ratio. Race is nominal. Number of people in your family is ratio, but we're kind of putting interval and ratio together for just the ease of understanding. Age and years, also ratio, so interval/ratio. Ice cream flavors. Chocolate, vanilla, rocky road, strawberry, that's nominal. Attitudes towards same-sex marriage, if it's on that Likert scale, it would be ordinal. So a few more things you need to know about survey questions and about survey design, which will help you with the next application activity. So we have been focusing on close-ended survey questions, but you might also come across some open-ended survey questions. So close-ended just means that you're giving the person who's answering the survey a list of choices to choose from. Open-ended would be you let them fill in the blank. And sometimes this means that open-ended survey questions could lead to more sort of qualitative data that's more in words, but in other times you ask someone how many people are in your household, and rather than giving them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as answer choices, you just let them fill it in. So before I get to sort of some of the technical definitions of these things, take a look at these survey questions and talk out loud, think to yourself, what do you think is wrong with each of them? So first one, do you believe that contrary to what the media says, raising taxes does not create jobs? Question 2, do you believe that news coverage is biased on both terrorism and immigration problems? So I would argue that the first one, the wording is confusing, and also the use of this not create jobs, sort of this negative wording makes this a difficult question to understand. And for the second one, do you believe that news coverage is biased on both of these things? That's what we would call a double-barreled question, right? So maybe you agree that news coverage is biased on one of these, but not on the others. How could you successfully answer this question if it's double-barreled, right? So again, questions should be relatively straightforward. So in terms of developing survey questions, you want to avoid double-barreled questions. You want to avoid trying to ask two things at once. You want to avoid negative wording. This doesn't mean that you don't ask people about things that are kind of negative or difficult things to talk about. It's just the way it's worded. When you use the word no or you use the word not, it gets confusing. Another thing is to avoid being biased. right? So that was also a problem with some of the survey questions from the previous slide. And also be culturally sensitive. So just some quick examples. Double-barreled, right? This is problematic. Should the state abandon its child care subsidies and spend the money? You're trying to ask two things at once. And for the second question, are you not in a relationship at present? It would just be much easier to ask someone, are you currently in a relationship? For biased items, right? Are you male or female? That's kind of this gender binary. Maybe you want to give people more options. Maybe you want to let people write it in. And also being culturally sensitive, right? So which denomination of Christianity do you follow? Assuming that everybody in your survey is a Christian. All right, so you are now ready for our class survey project. So this project kind of has a few different steps to it. But as a class, we will be conducting a survey, collecting the data online from our friends, peers, family, and also doing a bit of data analysis. But for now, we're focusing on developing the actual survey. So I put you into small groups. You're going to use a Google Doc, and you're going to come up with questions to tap into, come up with survey questions to tap into our research project. So our broad question is, what factors are associated with social connectedness among adults in the U.S.? So each member of the group will design 3 questions. Each question you design must be at a different level of measurement. And as a group, you need to have at least 2 questions getting at factors and 2 questions getting at social connectedness. Also identify who wrote the question and identify the level of measurement. And in the Google Doc, I've given you some examples of this. All right. So our broad dependent variable is this concept of social connectedness. And then we're also interested in identifying some factors that might influence social connectedness. So how might we measure how socially connected someone is? Maybe one way to do it is by number of close friends. Okay. But as a group, you'll think of other ways to measure social connectedness. And then what do we think are things that might influence or might be associated with somebody's level of social connectedness, right? So maybe if we think of number of close friends, maybe we think that gender might matter. Maybe we think age might matter. Maybe we think social class might matter. It's up to you to use your imagination to generate these survey questions, which is how we're operationalizing these concepts. All right. So if you have any questions about levels of measurement, or if the project doesn't make sense, I would encourage you to go back through the slides of the video and also ask me questions about details of how to do it.